So it appears that only the first time you start for a given stream, unless you're using their new interface, at which point it's not just the first. Oh, God. Anyways, yeah, so it's not showing up in the new stream interface. If I go to the old stream interface, don't save. It's starting using their new interface. Ah, there we go. It's not just the first.
Oh, here it goes. It goes now.
Anyways, yeah, so it's not showing up in the
Now
new stream interface. If I go to the old stream interface. Yeah, so there's just an encoding delay. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Are we about ready to start? Welcome to Althea's August community call. I'm Liz. I work with Althea on all things marketing, and I'm here with our co-founders, Justin, Jehan, and Deborah. And we also have special guest Austin here from our Forest Grove Altheahood. And we'll be talking with him, and then we'll also be talking and answering your Althea grants program questions. Sorry about that. I'm having a visitor right now. Hold on. Sorry, that was a cat behind my computer.
The internet is for cats.
The internet is for cats, and my cat really wants to join this live stream. Sorry about that, guys. So we will get into the questions. And we're going to talk with Austin first about organizing an Altheahood in your community. And so, Austin, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Austin. I live in Forest Grove, and I started my Altheahood about, 2 months now? A month ago? No, about a month. Month and a half. I'm bad at this. But, yeah, I'm 21, almost 22, and I am a big computer nerd.
So, well, can you tell us, Austin, about your Altheahood in Forest Grove? What made you think Forest Grove was a good place to launch an Althea network?
Well, if I could just find my piece of paper I lost. There it is. Okay, so I chose Forest Grove as a location. One, because I was living there, and two, I felt like the surrounding areas, like directly outside of Forest Grove, were like impoverished. They didn't have good connection to the internet, and I felt like the big ISPs didn't really have the infrastructure out there that could support the modern day internet, and I believe that they don't have a care to develop such a system, because what is it to a big company to spend thousands of dollars to connect only 3 or 4 people in a certain area that Althea could easily reach. But yeah, I think from what I've learned about this area, it's definitely been mostly because everybody's unsatisfied with what we have out here, as well as being kind of like an end of the line location. Just a little bit more, if we could just reach out just a little bit more, we can bring internet to potentially hundreds of people.
Right. Yeah, awesome, definitely. And this is just a reminder for everyone watching. You can pop your questions into the chat, or you can also ask them on Twitter. So, Austin, you've been really, really successful at online community outreach. Really, you've just blown it out of the water, reaching people on Facebook and other platforms. Can you share some of your tips and tricks for people at home who want to grow their own communities online, especially for this type of project?
This type of project's been kind of new for me because it's more local. I've been running Facebook pages and Instagram pages for quite a while, and so this kind of gave me a new challenge because it's more of a local connection. And I did some research and I found some Facebook groups in my local area, and that's where I started expanding out of. Is like I started asking questions, bringing up the, how do you feel about your internet company? What is one concern or one great thing that you like about it? What is one thing you don't? And I started asking these questions in all of the surrounding community Facebook groups I could find, and I got a lot of responses. And again, I got a lot of the insight that people are just unsatisfied, and you got to find that thing that those people are upset about. And for my area, it's unsatisfied service and expensive. It's expensive. You know, Forest Grove has its own utility company, and I pay less in utilities for electricity, water, and sewer than I do internet. So
Right.
it's crazy out here.
Yeah.
And I think really to reach out to your local area, you need to find that like talking point that can, each community has their own talking point essentially. And from my area, it's unsatisfactory service. Um, so I started my own Facebook group shortly after. I didn't get far with that, but I did with the Facebook page you guys had set me up with.
Right.
What I did is I started posting the links, making sure that I can funnel people into my Facebook page. And I also asked people that I knew that lived in this community, hey, do you mind inviting your friends to the Facebook page? Doing that and having them do that to their friends, that only exponentially gets better. So
Right.
that's pretty much what I do, like 300 likes in this
Yeah.
last month and a half. I don't
Yeah.
even
No,
know.
that's great.
So
And
yeah,
people are, asking lots of questions and seem really interested in the project. So it's been a great tool for you. Definitely. Um, so, do you have any advice to a new organizer who might be hesitant about setting up an Altheahood and getting involved and all of that?
really, my advice to a new Altheahood organizer, sorry, would be to make sure you know what you're talking about, and that's research, investigate, and engage with your community and find out what those key points that you need to go after for your community, because your community is not going to have interest if you don't know what you're talking about, or you're just kind of loosely organized. um, you know find out about your competitors, find out about the lack of your competitors. Things like that are going to be the most important pieces to starting an Altheahood. um, you know a good talking point for me has been, there's communities right outside of Forest Grove that pay $99 a month for dial-up speeds you can find in like 2001. Let those people be your motivation, pretty much. Feel the motivation in you to go help those people who are, you know, impoverished by big corporations who aren't caring for them.
Right. No, exactly. And that definitely, I think we've seen on our end, that takes a lot of groundwork and a lot of footwork. So we appreciate everything our organizers are doing, um, and all of that, because it takes a lot. Do we have from the panel? Do we have any other questions from Deborah or Jehan or Justin for Austin?
Nope.
They're all on. They're
No, but
they're all.
thank you, Austin. That was a really, really great, I think, description of the work that you do and why you're so successful with that, and really understanding what the needs are in the community and speaking to them. So thank you for telling us about that.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So that is basically what we have for Austin. If you guys want to find out more about becoming an organizer, go to our website. We'll pop some links into into the chat, and there's a bunch of links in the description of the video, so where you can reach out to us for everyone who wants to get involved. Now, you can also find out about being an organizer on our Republic page. And I think that's what we're going to talk about next, is our Althea Grants program and our partnership with Republic. Actually, first off on my list of talking points is how you become a validator, actually. So before we talk about the Althea grants, we're going to go to Jehan and talk about becoming a validator, which does tie into our Althea grants program. So Jehan, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so in case people don't know, a validator in the Althea system is basically just processing transactions on the blockchain. So right now, our two active deployments use Ethereum, and the other one uses a blockchain called XDAI. Anyway, routers have to pay fees, and on Ethereum, they're paying fees to people who are, just wasting electricity, GPUs, to the miners. So we're spinning up our own blockchain, which will have validators instead of miners. The difference is that the validator, instead of wasting electricity to basically have a say in the network, Althea token holders stake tokens to them. It's a proof of stake system. And so that's where we're giving out the tokens to organizers and others in our granting program. And those people will be staking tokens to validators, and they'll be getting a return from basically from the transaction fees, all the transaction. Anyway, so a validator basically, we really covered this pretty heavily in the last community call, I think, but yeah, a validator basically you need to have a computer that is that's online. You probably want to have it in a data center, be secure and stuff. There's a lot that goes into it. I won't get into the full thing again right now. But if you want to become a validator, right now we have a testnet up and live. We're going to be hard forking it on Monday, which is just for practice, right? So basically that's how you upgrade the code. You do a hard fork in many cases. So during that hard fork, we're going to be adding tokens, testnet tokens in. You need to have tokens to become a validator. So, or you would need to have somebody else delegate tokens to you, but right now it's just easier if it's your own. So basically, there's a form where you can sign up with your email, and let me send you, I don't know, Liz, I'll send you the blog post so you can add it, but basically I have a blog post on the two. In there, there's a link to a form where you sign up. And if you sign up on there with your email address, that first of all gives us a good way to reach all the validators, to inform them about upgrades. We realize that we didn't really have that. And then also for new people who haven't been validating on the network already, if you sign up there, then we'll add your address in. You're gonna have to you have to get the software up and make an address. But we'll get your address into the blockchain fork, and you'll be given tokens there. Once again, just testnet tokens, not working, but we'll let you participate in that process. And then once the real thing's live, then all the people who've gotten tokens through the granting program, they will be able to delegate those tokens to the validators to sort of validate transactions on behalf of them, and the validators charge a fee for that.
We had a question from the chat about making more nodes. So Ethan,
I think the latter part of this call, there's a lot of questions around the community outreach, starting a network, what that looks like. So I think we'll probably, if they don't mind waiting, we'll get into a larger discussion around all of that toward the latter part of this call.
Are they asking about making nodes, like making the hardware?
Well, they just said making more nodes. So let me find out. I'll get more details. Also, Austin has a question about how many validators can one person have? As much as we want?
Oh, no. So basically, yeah, I suppose so if you want, yeah. Basically, the way it works is there's a limit of 100. That might get raised to maybe around 300. But that's the number of validators that can be active, because they all have to sign off on every block. So if you have too many, then it takes too long to get all the signatures. So that being said, it's like basically if you have also the token holder in having if you're running multiple validators, it's better if you run one validator and people know about you. For instance, you can look to what's happening on Cosmos. We're basing our blockchain on Cosmos as like a blockchain framework, but they also have their own blockchain called the Cosmos Hub. And their validators, there's a lot of validators that are run as startups, and that's their whole business is being validators. And so they try to build a name for themselves. Like for instance, Figment's also on our testnet. They're also going to be validating us, but they have, they're well known. They make block explorers. They do whatever they can to get their name out, so people will delegate tokens to them. So there's no point in having several of them and just spreading your, you're dividing your sort of influence.
Cool. Also, there was, I think, some questions about the state of the deployment, how the network works itself in details. So yeah, people who want to know it all about Althea and what we're doing.
Yeah, if you want to know it all, then I would recommend you read the white paper. It's a little dense. Definitely gets into all the details. There's also a blog post I'm working on called "Roles in the Network," but I haven't been allowed to publish that yet because I forgot to put in the organizers. A very important part. But in my defense, it was meant to be more of a technical roles in the network. Maybe I can really try to give a really quick overview. But again, if you really want to know it all, read the white paper. But basically, there's a few different kinds of nodes on the ground that make up a network. So there's end users, relays, gateways, and exit nodes. End users are people using the internet. Relays are people who have invested a little bit more in some equipment and are kind of relaying the packets, maybe from 5 or 6 different households. They're relaying it on. Gateway is a node that has a high bandwidth commercial connection to the internet. It's like a tier 1 or tier 2 connection, they're called, or called backhaul too sometimes. And they're basically selling that bandwidth into the network. So you might have many relays connecting to them, to the gateways. And there could be multiple gateways on a network. Relays could be connecting multiple. It can be very fluid, but basically the gateways are selling bandwidth into the network. And then the exit nodes, they're like VPN servers, and so the end users, their traffic is encrypted to the exit node, and that makes it so that the gateways don't have to worry about what people are doing on the internet when they're selling that bandwidth. It also makes it so the end users don't have to worry about the gateways, so the relays being able to see their traffic. It's all encrypted. And it does some other things in the system too. They perform a sort of a speed check, keep everyone honest and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things. And then there's the blockchain validators. There's another kind of node, but that's very different. And those guys, like I just went over those guys, they're processing transactions. They don't intersect with the other physical nodes. They each, they're in a data center. They have their own job to do. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good overview. I don't know if I'm okay. Well, then there's organizers. So organizers are like Austin. They're people who are setting up a network in their area. An end user node will be paying bandwidth. They'll be paying like bandwidth charges to the relays, and that money goes through the system. It pays the relays and it pays the gateways and the exit and stuff. But they also pay a fixed monthly fee to the organizer, and the organizer does stuff like tech support, helps people out with it, also helps promote it and stuff like that. So I don't know if that is a good overview, but yeah, I would say read the white paper if you want to know really all the details.
Yeah, I would say read the white paper and definitely stay tuned to our blog and our Twitter feed. We post all of our articles that are on our blog go out on our Twitter feed. And we also do have a Facebook page, so a lot of our stuff goes up on there as well. But if you want to stay up to date on everything that's going on Althea, just follow us on Twitter, join us for these community calls, and definitely keep, we have great updates on our blog. So take a look at those, because that'll really give you a sense of everything.
I forgot to mention during the validator thing, if you want to become a validator, then I think the best thing to do right now is to check to get into our Discord and go into the Althea validators room, and then just message me in there. I'm Jehan-Classic. That's going to be the best way to get up to speed if you're not up to speed already, because right now most of the updates and stuff we put out are kind of geared towards people who are already up and going. So if you go in Discord, then I can help you get set up. And I'll also say, if you want to do a validator, it really is better if you have. It's going to probably be pretty challenging for you if you don't have some kind of experience running servers. If you haven't done that before, of course you can always learn, but it is very much a system decision.
Yep, and I will pop the Discord invite into the chat for everyone, so you can join us there. Great, awesome, John. So Justin, there were some questions in our sign-up form and some things people were asking that I think relate to the things you're working on. So the high throughput hardware, 1 gigabit per second and greater, with some examples such as might be needed on a primarily wired network. So
so right now most of the stuff that we talk about a lot has a maximum throughput of about 500 megabits per second for the 3200 ACMs, so the blue routers. And that's pretty fast if you're using 5 gigahertz radios and aren't going for a 60 gigahertz deployment, which isn't practical in our 2 test deployments right now for various reasons. But there's no reason you can't have faster hardware. Specifically, the problem around that is mostly just finding something that's packaged nicely with sufficient power. So the first thing you'd want if you were doing a like multi-gigabit gateway is that you'd want to get a server. This is a random one pictured, but you'd want to get 100 gig SFPs. These are only 10. And from there, you'd take that out to a SFP, which is essentially a fiber connector switch. And then you could distribute it to many user devices from there. As for getting like a small embedded device that can push multiple gigabits, you mostly want to just look up one of these pfSense firewall boxes. As you can see, there are dozens of them, and they're mostly heat sinks, because that is inherently the problem with multi-gigabit throughput. With all the encryption we do, you need to dissipate a good bit of heat, and the stuff that's in modern routers isn't really ready for that yet. Give it a year or two, and I'm sure we'll be there no problem. As far as getting a server to push more than a gigabit, that's not hard. Even like a base Xenon will push 10 gigabit, and as for 100, you're going to have more trouble figuring out all of the SFP NICs network interface cards, rather than actually getting something to push that much. It's overall, WireGuard's a very efficient system. Now, in the long term, there are definitely some optimizations we can do for mostly wired networks, because right now we re-encrypt traffic as we forward it, and that's designed to deal with the problem of what if you're on an open radio frequency and everybody can see traffic in between any 2 nodes. And that's not really an issue in large-scale wired networks, but the software just hasn't been updated with a way to mark certain interfaces as wired, at which point it could do away with the re-encryption, and you could forward as fast as you're traditionally used to for whatever hardware. So yeah, I think that's a bit of a technical sort of subject there, exactly how to do high throughput wired networks rather than the more user-focused hardware, but I think I covered it pretty well. Let me know if you have any more questions.
Yeah, definitely. So that was all we had for you. A lot of our questions from our sign up this time around were really about becoming an organizer and setting up a community, an Altheahood in your community. And I think we'll get into talking about that. And that really dovetails in with, I think, our Althea Grants program, and which we just launched. So this is for Deborah. Can you talk about what it looks like to get local community support? What is the value proposition dimension so you can get political support behind your project? Because that's also very important for some of these projects.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the value proposition is pretty apparent. We know that when we can bring higher speeds, broadband speeds, anything that the FCC defines over 25 megabits per second to these communities, that there are proven statistics that it will increase, well, it'll mitigate your unemployment rates. It will increase property values, that you will have rural retention. We know that over the last 10 years in the United States, a lot of our rural population has been migrating to urban centers. So one of the really important things that a rural population can do to retain their population is to bring, high-speed broadband internet access to their communities. So fortunately, it's a pretty easy pitch, right? You're going to bring employment rates up. You're going to help economic prosperity, educational opportunities. I think everybody's kind of on the same page that we can bring that with the internet. As far as like what does generic community outreach look like, I think in a broader sense, it looks like working together with your anchor institutions that are already in your community. Most communities will have maybe a healthcare center, they'll have libraries, they'll have, a Kiwanis, a Rotary group, they'll have churches, they'll have organizations that speak to the community anyway. So when you work together in conjunction with them and also just doing, the pounding the pavement community outreach, you can really make a pretty big impact. We also see a lot of our deployments look at it from a business to business angle as well. So you'll see a lot of folks using the Chamber of Commerce or being a part of where other businesses are already located.
We did have one quick question before we continue on with some of the community stuff about from John George Bauer. I'm going to mispronounce your last name. So he asked the question about the high throughput because of the possibility of being on an open access network like Utopia or Amon, Idaho's. Is that, Justin, do you want to take that really quick and then we'll go back to the community stuff?
Yeah, so first of all, open access networks are networks where anybody can have access to the cables. And could you give me the exact wording of the question? Because I think I know what he's going for, but I want to make sure.
I asked that question about the high throughput because of the possibility of being on an open access network like Utopia or Amon, Idaho.
Okay, so yeah, on an open access network, you would mostly use. So on an open access network, you would use most of the same hardware that I outlined, most of the same strategies. That would be one of the ideal cases for being able to mark interfaces as trusted. Because if you assume that the open access network has their VLAN isolation or however they're going to do this set up properly, then it should be nice and secure to go ahead and disable the per hop tunnels and be able to forward traffic at arbitrary speeds. And then at that point, you're just limited by the client device encryption speed, which is, right now 500 megabits per second for our go-to option. You can do a gigabit if you grab one of those x86 firewall devices instead. Yeah, Jehan?
Can I step in here? An open access network is one where the role of the service provider, who is, ISP with a logo and a brand and stuff like that, is separated from the role of the company who owns the, oftentimes the fiber optic infrastructure. I was just looking up Utopia here. This is commonly done. By governments, by municipalities who don't want to be in the role of kind of customer service and stuff like that. And so they will build the fiber and then they'll have some other company come in and charge a tiny bit extra over the cost that they're paying the city to lease it to provide a service consumer. So Althea is kind of like, I think you could think of it as being in a way like a little bit similar to that, in that it's not necessarily done by a municipality, but all the in a mature Althea network, all the routers which are on the ground, all the equipment that people have set up around their town. That's sort of like that's sort of like the open access network, because different organizers can operate on top of that, and so it's like it doesn't have to be. So you could have, like, you could have Austin doing his thing, and then maybe there's another organizer in Austin City who's set up. Maybe they've encouraged some people to set up more equipment somewhere else, and the places kind of overlap and stuff. But because of the fact that all the equipment is owned by the people whose property it's on, it means that you're not necessarily tied. You're not necessarily like tied to a particular provider to use the infrastructure in your area. I don't know if that makes sense. That doesn't necessarily get into the highly technical stuff that you're asking about, like fiber. But I think of it as Althea is kind of a decentralized open access model. What the dream is that you have lots of people, organizers like Austin, maybe even bigger ISPs come in and stuff too, and they can all perform that organizer role. And people, property owners, building owners, homeowners, they have hardware installed, and it's like part of their property, and it's just interlinked in this automatic network, and basically bandwidth gets bought from whoever.
Yeah, one of the in the chat, and just everyone in the chat, we are dealing with we have a little bit of a lag, or you guys are getting a little bit of a lag from what we're getting on our end. So that's why maybe some of the questions, there's a little bit of a delay in everything. So just bear with us. Chris with a K is also asking, well, John George said VLANs, yes. And then Chris with a K followed up with, so open access networks are to ISPs like utility companies, in parentheses distribution, are to power generators. And then also, so Ethan said SUP, like SUP, but I'm not sure if he could explain. I'm not sure if he's saying what's up or if he's asking a question about something. So please let me know in the chat.
Chris with a K, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's really the case. I think that ISPs are like utilities where ISPs in general are like utilities where there are no power generators. All they're providing is the network connections. So there is, in Texas, they have a deregulated public utility, which is like this kind of model, basically, where you might go to a power company and send them your money for your power bill. But there's different power companies around. You can sign up different ones, have different things going on, but they all use the lines that are owned by the city. And the important thing with the difference with Althea and these kind of municipal open access networks of various kinds is that instead of being owned by the government, the infrastructure is owned by the people in the area. So I don't want to get too off topic with this topic, but I got a lot of stuff covered.
Yeah, no worries. So back to Deborah, and I think this, we're talking about these open access networks and community networks, and one of the questions from our sign-up sheet was about future sites, and how do we decide on a future site? And yeah, basically, Deborah, let us know.
Yeah, so right now we are happy to have folks come to us and say, look, I think Althea is going to work well in my community. And right now we have a really great portal to do that in, which is republic.co/Althea. You can go there. You can submit a proposal if you think Althea is a great fit for your community. And we'll take a look at that and see if we also agree. And basically that's going to look like two things. One, does the geography make sense? Do you have a lot of obstacles to geography? Obviously, in my network in Oregon and many other networks, the sort of agile dynamic deployment that you can do with relays make even difficult geography likely in many areas. And then the other sort of piece that we look at there is a market fit. If you're in a place where they already have, let's say, municipal fiber, where like in Sandy, Oregon, it's I think a gigabit for $40 or $50. The value proposition of Althea is going to be a more difficult pitch there. So, we probably wouldn't think that that's the best thing to go ahead with in the short term. But I would encourage anyone if they think, hey, Althea looks like a great fit, I want to go ahead and spearhead a network, to go to republic.co and /Althea and submit a proposal.
Awesome. Yes, and I put the link is in the chat for everyone. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me jump in again. About the republic.co thing, I just wanted to sort of give people a frame of reference on why we're doing it. And so basically, Republic is a Reg CF, this regulation crowd fund. It's a new legislation that came out in 2012 to give to sort of give people stock or other things like that. But basically, we're working with them to be able to legally give away tokens. And the reason we want to do that is, first of all, we of course want to have people be extra incentivized to be organizers, but I think most organizers are not necessarily incentivized by the tokens anyway. But the real reason is that as we're setting up a blockchain, basically the token holders control the system. They control the blockchain and the software updates and stuff, and they also get part of the fees. So we want that distribution of tokens to be one where, people know what they're doing and they know what they're talking about. So that's kind of our goal there.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, how can you be an active participant in the project when you have other obligations, school, and there's not an active Altheahood in your area? This is the low and slow route to building a local support for an Altheahood. Like, what can people do if they're not quite ready to just be a full-time organizer or a part-time organizer? How do you start getting involved in early stages because you love the project or that?
Yeah, if being an organizer or doing some of the on-ground work isn't a good fit for you, there are other ways to be involved in the project, like becoming a validator, or I think probably Justin has some way to participate as an open source contributor as well. However, if we're talking about how do we kind of do this low and slow in the community, I think many of these relationships actually and community building actually lend itself to kind of this crockpot low and slow marination process. And especially if we look at maybe partnering with a municipality or with a university or a hospital, those relationships take a while. And there's something that can be done on, just an hour or so a week, or just a few hours a month as you are doing something else. You can start the project, look at the budgeting, and find those community partners and build those relationships over time. And actually, like our Hilltop organizers in Austin, also in Forest Grove, we've been talking and planning these projects for over a year before a lot of the actual boots on the ground work started to happen. So I would encourage you to sort of start thinking about it, doing some mappings, looking at who those anchor institutions are in your community, and building those relationships now.
Yep. And B just jumped in the chat to say exactly what you said, Deborah, about working for a year at this. And same with Austin. I don't know, Austin, can you give any more insight to that low and slow process, since you're here still with us? Is he on mute? Oh.
Yes, I am on mute. Okay. So what was the question?
Just, kind of going with what Deborah was talking about, the low and slow process of building this project when you might not be ready right away to jump in as a organizer. And Deborah talked about working for a very long time, just talking about it for the past year before you ever really start getting signups.
Yep, I personally I found Deborah's project about a year ago. Whenever you started, Deborah, I started finding it on social media.
Yeah, it might even been 2 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah, and I followed her project since then, and I've kind of been aware of it. I tried helping out a little bit, but life distance myself. I had to distance myself because of life issues. But you gotta be ready, and it's a slow process, and you gotta figure out all the little nooks and crannies and make sure you have the right environment for you to start an Althea network.
Awesome.
I'd
Definitely.
I would add to Chris with a case. Chris with a case question: how quickly are organizers expect to jump on installs once they reach a sign-up goal? I can start organizing now, but could be full-time yet to get your field work until next spring/summer. I think that starting now is great. I think the way things go probably will be next spring/summer. Before, I don't want to be discouraging, but there's a lot of things in this process that are kind of slow moving. Getting buy-in from people with property, or also negotiating the backhaul for the internet, the main internet access for the network. So I think it's definitely good to get started, and just to we'll set up Altheahood's website and stuff, and start signing people up. And I think if you sign 100 people up overnight and then you try to go back to them in a year, maybe that would be maybe they would have forgotten about you or something. Maybe that would be ideal, but it's probably not going to be like that. It's more like you'll have a slow trickle of people signing up first, and then by the time you do have 100 people sign up, there's already going to be a lot of buzz from it. So I think it's great to get started whenever. And you can also, maybe you could even have your organizing activities be a little bit slower at first, without obligations. Just sign up a few people and see where it goes.
Yep. Yeah, that's great advice. And again, like, all of the links are in our description and in the chat if you do want to get involved and reach out. So just let us know. Another question from the sign-up sheet is, this person lives in a university town with 170K population. What's the most effective strategy to start building an Althea network in a town that size? So that's a great question. So this is about more of urban built. So can you guys talk about that?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question, because I think a lot of folks have the misperception that when they go into these projects, they look at it, they miss the trees for the forest, right? Like, so they think, how am I going to roll out to 170,000 people all at once? And in reality, that's not how it works, right? Even if you are a large company, you'll notice if you look at how Google rolls out, or any of these other, like, what they call fiber hoods, right, where they're going to roll out a larger deployment, they'll break it up into neighborhoods of maybe 300 or 400 households at the most. So when we approach the projects, you're really going to look at, where should we start? Where's the most need? Where does it make a sense, both from this perspective of where we can bring the fiber in, and where it makes the most sense to deploy to first. So even if you have a large population of 170,000 people, you're going to want to find a neighborhood that's a good fit to get started. Or if you really do want to tackle a larger project all at once, break them into several neighborhoods to do that, to roll out.
Yeah, great. Yes, which is why we call them Altheahoods, because they're neighborhoods. Okay.
I actually want to make a comment real quick, and that is that acquiring customers is the hardest part of being an ISP. It's the slow part, because it's human. You've got to go, you've got to install equipment, you've got to set it up in their house, you've got to switch over who they pay, and this is the real, like, bastion of defense that all of the big incumbent corporate ISPs use. There's no reason you can't switch between the Comcast and AT&T connection to your house every second and pick whichever's cheapest this second, other than that they don't want that, because the fact that you are an attached customer helps protect their monopoly. So Althea has to overcome this so that new users can be hooked up. But the fundamental difference between Althea and existing internet service providers, and even existing open access networks, is that Althea is the logical conclusion of an open access network, where anyone can show up and provide you service over the existing connection to your house. So once you are hooked up to an Althea network, you're no longer a captured customer forever. If somebody built a new fiber line, the entire neighborhood will instantly see their connection upgraded as all the routers switch to the new, faster, cheaper backhaul. Whereas right now, if I were to build a fiber line to, let's say, the neighborhood that I'm in, it would take me literally years to go to every home and upgrade every user. So that's just a point that I always like to focus in on with Althea, because it is something that our organizers have to face. They have to go and acquire users the old-fashioned way. But it's something that Althea solves for good. Like, this is the last time that you'll have to do this, hopefully.
Yes, that's the idea. So another question that we had: how viable is an Althea network in a highly populated rural area where, for example, Frontier and Spectrum already offer fiber? So again, this kind of gets back to Justin's point he just made. But Deborah, if you want to take that, or...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you're in an area where you're clearly a better value proposition, it's easier to kind of get established. Where if you're coming in, if you have 50 megabits per second and a much lower cost. However, about 2/3 of my network has other options. They could go actually with fiber that's about $40 US, which is roughly comparable to what our option are as well. So there is still leverage in the community aspect and this sort of value of decentralization. And we talk about this in cryptocurrency a lot, right? But what does it mean for people in communities, right? So decentralization, of course, that freedom of choice, being able to switch between providers and having a locally based option that where the money stays local, where your neighbors paying neighbors for bandwidth as opposed to a large corporation still has a lot of value. So while I would say you still want to find an area with good market fit, and you definitely want to look at what your budget can do. I mean, sometimes in these areas where you do have better options, it's also cheaper for you to get started. So you might be able to bring in a gigabit for $300 a month of dedicated internet access. So you may not be really risking as much. Whereas if there isn't much fiber, you might be looking at or even sometimes $3,000 for a gigabit. So really, it's the budgeting. Jehan, it looks like you want to say something? No? Okay.
And we have a good, we have some good comments in the chat just talking about people who want to become organizers. I know Chris with a K, you're making a lot of good points, and B is also there. So if you want to be an organizer, talk to other organizers and people who are already doing it too, because they are on the ground, they have a lot of good experience. And every process is a little bit different. So if your speed is a little slower, if yours is a little faster to ramp up, we welcome all types because we know it's a process, definitely. Another question that we had, how to set up payments in a way that is simple enough that even a grandmother or grandfather can understand it and manage without assistance once they've been shown. This is a good question because we do use crypto in the payment system. So yeah, how do we set this up for people who have no idea what this is?
Yeah, and that's something I'm really familiar with. And a lot of my network is retired folks, so people in their 60s and 70s, that this is their first interaction with using any kind of cryptocurrency at all. Actually, I think the vast majority of people, this is their first interaction with that. So first of all, we don't lead with cryptocurrency. You lead with the community aspects. You lead with the faster and the cheaper. That's where the value is. Cryptocurrency is just how we pay for the internet. So what part of the install process, the last part of the install process, once we set their router up in their home, they're getting internet, then we sit down and we set them up with a Coinbase wallet on their phone. And we refer to this as like a digital payment and like just a payment app on their phone. Go through the process of setting that up. Takes maybe about 5 minutes. That first part, of course, you do the KYC. It can be a little problematic, but just walking them through the steps, it becomes pretty easy. And then we have it, so you just scan the QR code to send the ETH from the phone to the router. And I'll be actually coming out with a blog post that sort of expands a little bit more on like tips and tricks to, impart some of that and go through that process. But ideally takes usually about 7 or 10 minutes, and we get them set up. You can also go to althea.net/top-up to get a sense of what the actual instructions are for folks. But yes, once they're set up, it's pretty much done. They don't need a lot of follow-up help. They just get a text that their balance is low and send money to their router, and things keep kicking along.
Yeah, I think people forget when people say, cryptocurrency, it's confusing and hard and all that. I think they forget that they're comparing it to, I think they're comparing signing up or getting started in a cryptocurrency system. They're comparing it to using a conventional payment system. And I actually think cryptocurrency is often easier. It's easier to get set up with Ethereum in a lot of ways than it is with or than it is with a Verizon account or something. And so it hasn't actually been a real problem in our networks.
Has anyone ever tried to use Western Union? It's so much easier than that.
I have. Various reasons. Yeah, I would love something easier. Okay, awesome. I think those are most of our questions that we had come in from our sign-up sheet. And I think we've gotten to everything that is come in from the chat and anywhere else. We'll be putting all of our links are in the description. I will update the Twitter link. Justin informed me that it was the old Twitter link, so I need to update that. And you can follow us on there. Like I said, I really encourage you to keep tabs on our blog. We have some great blog posts. We can really learn a lot about what we're doing, all of our updates, and we've got some good ones coming up too. So definitely connect with us. And I want to thank, does the panel any last words before we sign off? No? You guys are all good?
Have a good day.
Awesome. Yes.
I like Justin for me.
I'm going to give a little shout out to the chat really quickly before we sign up. This was a great chat. There's a lot of discussion going on and still happening. So you guys, the invite to our Discord is also in the chat, and please join us there and we can keep the conversation going. So to be Chris with a K, who else was in the chat? Ethan was in the chat, John George. I think that's it. And to all the other, Austin was in the chat for a little bit. And to everybody else watching, awesome, thank you. And we will see you on our next community call. I think that's all. Bye, everyone.